Humanity left the caves thousands of years ago. At least that's what we think. But there is a place where that era never ended. Mexican families still live inside the rock, without structure, without comfort, and far from everything that the 21st century considers basic. Generations are born and die in the darkness of the stone. Today, Bello Mundo will take you to see a Mexico that almost no one knows exists. Number 1. Location and general information. Our journey begins in northern Mexico in the state of Chihuahua, a huge border region full of contrasts. On one side, cities connected to the United States with roads, trucks, and heavy commerce. On the other, a mountainous area where the terrain rises, breaks, sinks into valleys, and seems to do everything to dispel any idea of an easy life. It is in this highest part of the state that the so-called Sierra Tarahumara is located, a region of cold mountains, pine forests, and stone walls. There, the terrain rules everything. The roads are full of curves, the villages are scattered across plateaus, and it feels like any trip takes much longer than it should. In some parts of this mountain range are the Barrancas del Cobre, a set of deep canyons that cut through the ground like an open wound. Many people know the place because of the landscapes, the photos from the lookout point, and the train tours. But behind this postcard image, there is a much harder daily life, hidden in the slopes and crevices of the mountain. It is in this setting that the people who interest us in today's story live, the Raramuri. So, before entering the caves, we need to understand who they are and why their lives ended up so tied to this specific piece of rock. Number 2. Indigenous peoples. The Raramuri are one of the oldest and most resilient indigenous peoples in all of Mexico. Today, they live scattered across distant villages in the mountainous regions of the state of Chihuahua. But before they were pushed into the mountains, they occupied a much larger area. Much of the north of the country was their territory, and their lifestyle was different. They lived in small communities called rancherias. Simple houses far apart from each other, with people scattered across hillsides, valleys, riverbanks, and hilltops. They were connected by trails, not roads. Their livelihood was based on traditional agriculture, growing corn, beans, squash, and peppers, all planted together on the same piece of land. They also harvested fruits, gathered herbs, and hunted when they could, but their strength really came from the land. These people always moved on foot from one place to another. Walking for miles was never an exception. It was normal. This was how they visited relatives, participated in ceremonies, and traded between communities. It is no wonder that the name Raramuri itself is often translated as the swift-footed ones. The brutal change came in the 16th century. With the arrival of the Spanish came silver mines, religious missions, and attempts to gather the indigenous people into controlled villages to work for them and abandon their customs. Many people's response was to flee. Entire families climbed into the mountains, disappeared into the canyons, and hid where white people could not easily reach them. This escape created a new map. Over time, the low valley region fell into the hands of the settlers, and the indigenous people who resisted were pushed deeper and deeper into the mountains. That is how these people became known for occupying the harshest, coldest, and most isolated places in Chihuahua. And that helps explain why, centuries later, there are still families living in caves. When the world pushes you out of everything, the only thing to do is to cling to what little remains. And in this case, what remained was rock and tradition. Number 3. Daily life, food, and beliefs. In the mountains, daily life revolves around 3 basic things: food, climate, and community. The food is simple, but it has a lot of meaning. What is planted is what is eaten, and what is eaten tells the story of those who live there. Corn, beans, and squash continue to be the basis of almost everything that goes into the pot. From this corn comes pinole, a toasted and ground flour that can be turned into a drink, porridge, or mix to accompany long walks. Light, resistant, and nutritious, pinole accompanies the people of the mountains from childhood to old age. During times of celebration or ceremony, tesquino, a fermented drink also made from corn, comes into play. It's not just for drinking. It is a symbol of unity, shared among families and neighbors as a way to celebrate, seal agreements, and maintain strong bonds. Now, just look at the street of a Raramuri community to understand that clothing also speaks. Men usually wear loose shirts, usually white or colored, with loose shorts that allow room for movement. On their feet, they wear handmade sandals with tire soles. Nothing is random. Everything there was designed to withstand the heat of the day, the cold of the night, and the mountain trails. The women, on the other hand, maintain one of the group's most visible traditions: the use of blouses with built-in managuas, a kind of long, flared tunic full of color, volume, and embroidery. They combine them with patterned skirts and headscarves, creating a look that blends identity, functionality, and history. In a region where everything has to last, clothing is also made to withstand wear and tear. But that doesn't mean it lacks beauty. Quite the contrary. The bright colors, fabric details, and unique cuts have become a trademark of the Raramuri people. In terms of religion, we can say that it is a middle ground. Number 4. Religion, beliefs, rituals, and legends. For those who live in those mountains, faith is not something that is kept in a book, much less separated from everyday life. It is in the fields, in the corn that sprouts slowly, in the silence of the mountains, in the stories that are passed down from one generation to the next. The spirituality of the Raramuri is a mixture of ancient tradition and Catholicism, which was brought by the Jesuits centuries ago. But it is not rigid, full of rules. They have adapted everything to their own way. Mass and ritual go hand in hand. The cross and the spirit of the mountain share the same space. At the center of it all is Onoruame, the creator of the world. But he is not a distant being. Quite the contrary. He is present. He is in nature, in celebrations, in everyday gestures. It is with him that the community converses when they dance, when they plant, when they pray. Everything is mixed together. In fact, it is not only people who have souls. For the people of the mountains, stones, trees, rain, everything has a force behind it. A living soul, which they call Iwigala. And keeping this world in balance is a collective duty. That is why they make a point of feeding God. And it is not a metaphor. They say it just like that. One way to do this is with tesquino, a drink made from corn. It looks like beer, but it is much more than that. It is sacred. It appears in all important rituals, passed from hand to hand at parties that last through the night, with dancing, music, and communal food. There is also the Yumari ritual, or Rutuburi, depending on the region, which is like a great celebration of life and the harvest. People dance, sing, give thanks, and keep their relationship with the spiritual world alive. And if someone falls ill, the Owiruame, a kind of healer, enters the scene. He is responsible for interpreting signs, listening to dreams, and understanding when the body falls ill because something within the soul has become unbalanced. Dreams, incidentally, play a huge role. For them, dreaming is a way of receiving messages, sometimes a warning, sometimes an instruction, sometimes just a reminder that there is more to the world than meets the eye. To outsiders, all this may seem like a jumble, but to them it makes perfect sense. It is a way of life where spirituality is not confined to a temple, nor does it depend on a book. It is in what is planted, what is sung, what is shared. Meanwhile, the cave remains the starting and ending point, and that is what we are going to talk about now. Number 5. The caves. Today, in various parts of the Tarahumara Mountains, caves still serve as homes. And when we say home, we mean it in the most literal sense possible. There is a stove on the floor, stacked firewood, hanging pots, a bed leaning against the wall, and a makeshift closet in the corner. The space that seems like a temporary shelter to many people is a permanent home for these families, where they are born, grow up, and die. Some are already in their 4th generation living in the same stone hole. The grandmother slept there, the daughters grew up there. The grandchildren played on the same rock ledge that now serves as a living room. No one went there for adventure. They stayed because there was no better alternative. And when the cold sets in, that piece of rock becomes the only possible shelter. During the day, the temperature varies, but at night, the ice touches the skin. Outside, the wind cuts through. Inside, the rock holds the accumulated heat and insulates the body from the freezing cold. There is no heater. There are no glass windows. What maintains the temperature is the natural structure of the mountain. The space is cramped, but it works. Every inch has been adapted as best as possible. Some people have put up partitions with blankets for privacy. Others have made a kind of makeshift bathroom inside the cave itself, with a hole in the floor and a water outlet dug with a hoe. When possible, they sell coffee, food, and pignol. Many families take advantage of the flow of tourists visiting the region and set up a small shop at the cave entrance. Others make handicrafts or offer tea made from plants native to the mountains. But the problem is not what is inside, it is what is missing. There is no running water, there is no sewage system, there is no health center, there are no basic amenities. Even so, for many people, it is easier to face the mountain than to take a chance in the city. And that's where we come to the harshest contrast in this story. Number 6. The danger outside the caves. For those who live in the city, it may seem strange that someone would prefer to stay in a cave rather than try a more structured life. But just look at what awaits outside. It's not just the cold and hunger that threaten those who live in the mountains. There's also what comes from outside. For decades, the region has suffered from deforestation, logging, large-scale cattle ranching, mining, and all kinds of projects that use the land as a resource, not as a home. Several studies point out how the invasion of farmers and companies has worn down the territory, reducing forests, decreasing water, and making life increasingly difficult for communities. When the environment becomes poorer, there is less space to plant, less game, and less clean water. This pushes more people to migrate. Men and women end up going to other cities in the same state, or even to larger centers in search of work, often informal, without protection, without a contract, without any guarantees. And that's when everything gets worse. When one of these families decides to leave the mountains, what lies ahead is a city that speaks another language, demands a different pace, and offers no support structure. Most arrive without documents, without education, and without any reference to how things work. They have no relatives waiting for them, no support network, no guidance. The only thing that awaits them is a lot of prejudice. Being indigenous in Mexico still means, in many places, being seen as cheap labor, people without education, without preparation, or without value. Studies on inequality in the north of the country show that indigenous communities have less access to education, healthcare, and income than the rest of the population, and this is no accident. It is the result of half-hearted public policy over decades. As a result, what is left for them is hard work, that is, when work is available and wages are low. And the worst part is that even when they do get a job, their conditions are different from those of others. Because they are easy prey in their quest for survival, they are more likely to face exploitative bosses, poor housing, and difficulty even understanding how to take a bus or enter a hospital. Many people end up on the streets, begging for help, selling handicrafts, food, or simply trying to get by as best they can. In practice, the bill comes from both sides. Those who stay in the mountains face a lack of medical care, distant schools, and difficulty selling what they produce. Those who go to the city deal with racism, abuse, poor housing in peripheral neighborhoods, and a reality check that crushes any illusion that everything is better in the city. That is why, even without stable electricity, running water, or the minimum of modern comforts, so many people choose to remain in the caves. Because there, at least, the territory is familiar. There, the rules are clear, the language is that of home, the food is what they know how to prepare, and the cold, however harsh, is the same as their grandparents faced. Outside of there, what is frightening is not the future, it is the unknown. Number 7. Tourism, trains, and the risk of becoming an attraction. While life remains difficult for those who live there, the surrounding region has become a famous tourist route. There are scenic trains crossing the mountains, photo opportunities at viewpoints with the Barrancas del Cobre in the background, hotels with views of the abyss, zip lines over the canyon, and package deals selling adventure in the mountains. In supporting cities such as Creel, classified as Pueblo Mágico, magical town, contact with these people has become part of the itinerary. Agencies offer visits to communities, tours of valleys with mushroom-shaped rocks or stone monks, and stops at caves where families have lived for decades. In some cases, the stone house has even gained title to the property and become an official visitor attraction, as is the case with well-known caves in the Bocoina region. There are two sides to this. On the one hand, it generates income. Families start selling handicrafts, food, coffee, tea, opening the cave door to show how they live and earn some money from it. On the other hand, there is a huge risk of turning people into attractions, as if they were living exhibits. They are just for tourists to look at, photograph, and leave. Ultimately, the same landscape that enchants outsiders is the harsh environment of those who were born there. For some, it is the setting for a weekend adventure. For others, it is the only place where they can still exist the way they always have. Number 8. The future. The future of this part of Mexico is a huge question mark. When someone asks what tomorrow will be like for these families who still live in caves, no one can answer with certainty. On the one hand, there is a desire for change. There are young people who dream of studying, working elsewhere, having a house with running water, guaranteed electricity, and working internet. There are organizations trying to bring school projects, health clinics, solar energy, road improvements, and more frequent services to the area. On the other hand, reality holds everything back. The mountains remain distant, the state continues to provide little support, and money remains scarce. Many plans die on paper, lost between campaign promises, bureaucracy, and a lack of real interest in looking at those who live outside the tourist hub. The greatest threats are not just the cold and poverty. Climate change, deforestation, drought, and exploitation of the territory are slowly changing what sustains this way of life. If the soil becomes weaker, if the water decreases, if the forest recedes, it becomes even more difficult to plant, raise animals, and keep the whole family there. There is also the silent risk of cultural loss. When survival becomes difficult, many people are forced to leave the mountains, seek employment in large cities, and leave their children in boarding schools or distant schools. As a result, the language weakens, rituals become less frequent, children grow up hearing more Spanish than Raramuri, and little by little the group's way of life is left behind. On the other hand, the very resistance of these people shows that it is impossible to predict the outcome. They have already endured war, colonization, mining, land invasion, hunger, and abandonment. They remain there, clinging to the rock, the language, and the memory of their elders. If the projects that exist today are taken seriously, it is possible to imagine a scenario in which the new generations have a real choice: to be able to continue in the mountains with school, health, and dignity, or to leave for the city without being thrown straight into poverty and prejudice. If nothing changes, the risk is to see this way of life disappear, not because someone decided it, but because it became impossible to continue. And that's it for today. So, what do you think? Had you heard about this community and their way of life before? Tell us in the comments what surprised you most about this video. If this video made you see Mexico in a different light, leave a like, share it with those who enjoy this type of story, and subscribe to the channel. And of course, don't forget to activate Hypar's new feature. That way, Bello Mundo can continue traveling to these places that almost never appear on screen, but say so much about the world we live in. See you next time!